I don't share.
East Hampton Town Board, we are live.
Thank you, Jason. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the October 15th, 2024 Town Board Work Session. Carol, if you could please read the roll call.
Present. Present.
Present.
Present.
Present. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So this morning, we will start our meeting with the public portion, and we ask that you kindly keep your comments to 3 minutes, and that's followed by work session topics, and we have a last-minute deletion. We're not going to be hearing from Jeannie Carrozza on bids as all the evaluations weren't available yet. So we'll start with our town administrator, Becky Hansen, who will take us through the 2025 tentative budget. That'll be followed by the Ditch Plains Beach Coastal Dune Restoration with Kate Rogers and Patrick Baranu from Coastal Science and Engineering, followed by the new Senior Center SEQR, a presentation by Acting Planning Director Tina Lagaren, and finally, we'll be reviewing draft legislation for increased density for non-senior affordable housing projects, and our town attorney, Rob Connolly, will take us through that as Eric Shantz is on vacation. And that will then go to liaison reports and finally resolutions. So I have one member of the public signed up, and that's Carolyn Logan Gluck. So please join us, Carolyn, and welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Supervisor Burke Gonzalez and members of the Town Board. My name is Carolyn Logan Gluck, and I speak for myself this morning. The follow-up discussion to the Deputy Supervisor's Liaison report last Tuesday delivered a gut punch. It is abundantly clear that the Town Board intends to renew the Maidstone Gun Club's lease without first offering the Wayne Scott Citizens Advisory Committee the opportunity to review and comment before it is finalized and signed. I believe it is of little use to engage in a review of who said what. The minutes and many witnesses, some of whom are in this room, can speak to what has transpired at past WCAC meetings. Once dubbed the Cadillac of CACs, an epithet I doubt anyone would bestow upon it now. The WCAC has made every effort to fulfill its mission of facilitating open communication between the community and the Town Board with the utmost integrity and goodwill. The Town Board, relying on procedure, has made this impossible. About the Maidstone Gun Club lease, there are so many questions. What safety measures will be required and what safeguards put in place to ensure they are properly followed and maintained? Will there be a proper environmental analysis made of potential contaminants to the soil? Will best management practices be required for the cleanup of lead shot? And so on and so on. But about the Maidstone Gun Club renewal, there is, to my mind, only one question remaining. Has the Town Board done its due diligence, and will it demonstrate this to its constituents in satisfying one of the key terms required for renewing the Maidstone Gun Club lease, namely, the finding that the 97 acres is surplus property? I call your attention to the town's 100% renewable energy roadmap prepared by GDS Associates in 2023. Which singles out from a list of 10 other municipal solar candidates 150 acres of public land encompassing the Maidstone Gun Club for a ground-mounted solar installation, a pathway for municipal solar that could support more than 15 megawatts of solar capacity, having, according to the report, a substantial impact both on annual carbon emissions and renewable energy usage. I imagine this would do a lot to offset the estimated 14 to 22,000 metric tons of CO2 generated by the East Hampton Airport. I imagine this would do a lot to augment the 130 megawatts of electricity generated by the South Fork Wind Farm that runs up underneath Beach Lane and Wayne Scott. You will argue that the directors of the Maidstone Gun Club exercised their option to renew on March 2nd, 2022, prior to the date of the roadmap. But I leave it to your collective conscience and sound judgment in seriously evaluating this question. How would the Maidstone Gun Club benefit the community of the town of East Hampton? Thank you for your time and attention, and I look forward to seeing you on a happier occasion Thursday evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Is there anyone else here? Jeff? Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Supervisor and board members. I always stumble on that. Sorry. I want to talk about the gun club. As the board knows, and the public probably is becoming aware, there's strong evidence that rounds from an assault rifle struck a neighboring house and that it emanated from the gun club. There have been about 5 incidents between 2004 and 2015, similar incidents of rounds striking houses. And the court, a lawsuit was initiated by the neighbors, and in that lawsuit, the court has issued an injunction that has closed the club for 2 years. The board should be aware of the fact that the issuance of an injunction is based, it's a very high standard of proof to get an injunction. It's rarely granted at early stages in litigation. You need to show likelihood of success on the merits. In addition, the town is a co-defendant, which means it's jointly and severally liable. It's got significant liability exposure. And in addition, the gun club's activities probably constitute an inherently dangerous and ultra hazardous activity because it's a use that its normal use involves grave danger. The hearing now is set to see whether the court will issue a further injunction on October 30th. And at that hearing, one could expect that all the relevant facts and evidence will be become available. Meanwhile, the club, the private club, it's insolvent. It's currently in debt $161,000. It's grossly underinsured if it is insured. I checked it, and the last thing I saw, it had $500,000 insurance, which is a grossly inadequate amount for this kind of a use. It's required to indemnify the town for its legal fees, which it can't do because it's insolvent. And nonetheless, it was given a special and obviously illegal lease for a fee of $100 a year, which violates the New York State Constitution. The board may remember we had some discussions about illegal gifts under the New York State Constitution. It's an anti-corruption statute. So the question is it possible to get adequate financial security from this club for the risks that it creates, and can the club really perform? In addition, the town has shown an indifference to the lead contamination on site. In fact, in the court case, the plaintiffs wanted an environmental examination of the property, and shockingly, the town opposed it, and it didn't happen. The lease started in 1983. That was before the environmental revolution that brought the Democrats into power in the town of East Hampton. I was here at that time, back in 1983. It was a very different town. The lease ended in 2023. And in looking at a renewal, the town is going to have to decide this issue of surplus property, and that will require it to determine the market value at its highest and best use. Back of the envelope calculations about a solar farm on the 20 acres that were cleared indicate that it might yield $1.5 million a year in income. This for a town that's $8 million in deficit right now. The tenant cleared 20 acres without permission in a water recharge overlay area. Is this a violation of code compliance? I would say it is. There are noise issues with the club miles away. Is that a problem with the lease? Yes, it is a problem. And the lease provides for immediate termination if the tenant fails to honor any of its representations. And obviously, rounds of an automatic, semi-automatic rifle that hit a house violate the intent of the lease, which is to operate an ultra-hazardous activity safely. Excuse me. The renewal is not mandatory. And in fact, it is discretionary, and it requires the board to reevaluate the issue of surplus property. And to do that, you have to follow the requisites of Town Law Section 64, which likely requires a public hearing permits a permissive referendum, and likely requires my favorite, secret compliance. And in addition, since you're apparently, without making it public, renegotiating all the terms of this lease, you're not just renewing an existing lease, you're renegotiating everything, because I think there's a misguided intention that you're going to control the safety of this use. I've lost my train of thought on that. That means that you're not doing a ministerial renewal of a lease, which might be exempt under SEQR. You're doing a full-blown new lease. And again, that's an action that should require SEQR review. Affordable housing is another possibility. The cleanup of the land is a worrisome problem here. The club has only, historically cleaned it up when the market made the lead expensive enough to make it cost effective for them. But I remember, and you'll probably remember, the Krupinski property that we were dealing with on the airport. They wanted to renew their lease, and we were adamantly opposed to it until and unless they did a supervised cleanup. And that was required before the lease was renewed. Why isn't that an issue here? And if it is, it raises SEQR problems. The issue here is that the town of East Hampton has...
Wrap it up, Jeff.
I will. I would hope that since this issue involves life and death, it might be a 5-minute issue instead of a 3-minute issue. So I'd ask for a little bit more help here. The town has significant liability exposure here because of this ultra hazardous activity. If you take over the safety of this property in executing a new lease, you are the proprietor of the property. And when you act as a proprietor, you are not acting in your governmental functions. And under New York state law, you have personal liability in the same degree as any member of the public, which means that you town board members might actually have personal liability if something goes wrong, and it already has. But the real question is, why would the town expose itself to the huge prospect of liability after there's been concrete evidence of a complete breakdown of the safety protocols? The club is insolvent. It's already received a benefit for 30 years that they gained the town $3,000. Why, under those circumstances, would you dash in and say you're going to take over the safety operation of that club? If you do that, you're fully on notice. You know of the risks. You're admitting you're taking it over. And I wonder how your insurer is going to look at that. Why would you inject the town in managing a dangerous use, particularly weighed against the value of the property and what could be done with it and the value to the town? Who are you protecting? This property, which is 60 acres or more, is being wasted. It's been wasted over the last 30 years. It has not been used productively. And it's your obligation to deal with town assets in a rational way that reflects their market value. It's not 1983 anymore. And our renewable energy goals and our needs for affordable housing take priority over the interests of a private club. And I think it should be noted that the police department has not been using this facility for 2 years. They seem to be operating okay. They don't get certified at this facility. This is a very dangerous move. To me, as an attorney and a citizen, it is inexplicable why the town would put itself in harm's way to deeply engage in the management of this club after a failure of the safety protocols that we've seen. I think you owe the better management of town assets, better management of our liability, and more candor to the citizens and residents of the town. Thank you. And thank you for the extra time. I appreciate it.
Is there anyone else here that would like to address the board? Jason, is there anyone on the line?
No one has called in.
Okay, so we can move on to our topics. And we start with our town administrator, Becky Hansen, to discuss the 2025 tentative budget. Welcome, Becky.
Good morning. I'm here once again to present just an overview of the 2025 fiscal year tentative budget. And again, just for a quick review for those who haven't been listening or tuned in prior, the proposed 2025 tentative budget total spending is $103,722,303, an $8.2 million spending increase over the current fiscal year, or also equates to an 8.65% increase. The tentative budget proposes to pierce the tax cap levy this year. Under the New York State law, the tax levy cap was capped at 2%, which only for the town this year would have been just over $2.1 million. For the four major funds, the town is levying a total amount of $65.8 million. For a home with an assessed value of $4,000, the market value is just over $1.14 million, and you're living outside the village, your tax impact is just over $104 in fiscal year 2025. We have had a few changes since my last presentation last Tuesday to the budget, nothing major in my opinion. I had circulated some information to the board on Friday. Most of the adjustments you see are salary adjustments. In the A fund, we have a handful of A fund employees whose salaries need to be adjusted up. However, those increases are going to be covered by a decrease in one employee within the town attorney's office whose salary is being adjusted down. So those increases in the A fund will be covered by the adjusting down of the one employee within the A fund. There is an additional $6,800 as a result of that adjusting down on that one employee, which I would recommend diverting into probably the A funds engineering line just for a little extra money within that line. Within the highway fund, there is a regrade for one particular title that we didn't pick up in the initial document. That amount is about $1,600 of an increase, which can easily be covered on the revenue side with the same amount increase with on the revenue for interest in investments in the highway fund. In the B fund, we had, again, a number of salary adjustments that we uncovered. Again, nothing major. We will be adding a senior office assistant position within the planning department as additional support staff. In addition, there is a request for an increase in outside professional funding within the planning department of approximately $180,000. So in order to address that increase in the spending, we are removing a part-time salary line out of the planning department. And since I do believe that this would be a one-off within fiscal year 2025, I would recommend that the town board add additional fund balance out of the B fund. That would bring the total spending increase just over $256,261 for fiscal year 2025. However, there will be no additional impact on the tax levy for 2025. So all of those numbers, projections within the tentative budget that you see relating to property taxes and the tax rates, those amounts will remain the same. So if the board is agreeable to these changes, or if there's anything else that comes up today, that what is determined today will be published as the preliminary budget. This Thursday, you have your public hearing to override the tax cap, and the board can then adopt it at its November 7th meeting. This Thursday, you will also do a notice for a public hearing for the actual budget hearing, which will be held on November 7th, and the budget to be adopted on Tuesday, November 19th. So if the board has any other questions, or if the proposed adjustments right now are agreeable, then we can move forward and then notice the preliminary budget, which will be available to the public next week.
Great, thank you, Becky. Does anyone have any questions for Becky?
My question would be, Becky, would it be possible to get some numbers around how much it would cost to add to the town a full-time emergency manager position?
That depends on what it is. There are a number of civil service titles. So again, and then the question would be, does that title belong in the union? Is it an appointed position? So that will greatly determine the salary. And again, in addition to health benefits and retirement. So without knowing that number today, that can't be put into the preliminary budget because you have to agree to a number today because that's going to be noticed for the public hearing. Between now and then, if it's something that the board wishes to move forward, it can be brought up during the public hearing.
Thank you.
Comfortable taking the preliminary budget to the public hearing.
Okay.
Hear from the public.
I agree.
I agree as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Okay, so next up, we have the Ditch Plains Beach Coastal Dune Restoration. Jason, if you could please let Patrick in.
Working on that right now.
Perfect. And Kate, I'm assuming you want to do an intro?
Quick intro.
Or you want to wait until Patrick gets in?
Yeah, I'll wait till he gets in.
Yeah, Patrick looks like he's in.
Beautiful. Thank you. Welcome, Patrick.
Good morning. How are you guys doing?
Very well. It's a brisk morning here in East Hampton.
It is down here as well. Fall is here. Shall I go ahead and share my screen?
Patrick, just before you get started, I know that some of your slides will be introducing coastal science and engineering to us. Can you hear us well?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. And I just wanted to introduce the town team that's working on this, along with Coastal Science and Engineering. And that, of course, is David Lease, Councilmember Lease is co-shepherding this project, and Kim Shaw, Natural Resource Director, Melissa McCarran from that department, McCarran from that department, as well as Mark Abramson, Brian Frank, senior environmental planner, chief environmental planner, and Matt Jedlicka, our town engineer. So I just wanted to do a brief introduction for folks who don't know. This is a dune reconstruction for Ditch Plains Beach to protect the neighborhood from coastal flooding. And with that, I'll turn it over to Patrick.
Fantastic.
And I believe, Patrick, you can share your screen.
Yes, I'm going to try that right now. Let me make sure here. Let's see. Number one. Oh, let me change screens. Just a moment.
No worries.
Let's do this one.
There you go.
There, so you should see a header slide with no notes or anything.
That's what we see. Thank you.
Perfect. Great. Well, thanks everyone for having me. As Kate said, my name is Patrick Barano. I'm a project manager and coastal scientist with Coastal Science and Engineering. We're based out of Columbia, South Carolina, but have a long history of working in Long Island, particularly Eastern Long Island. So as a quick introduction to our company, we specialize in beach and dune erosion surveys, site-specific solutions involving projects like the one we're going to talk about today at Ditch Plains. We've completed shoreline assessments in over 100 locations from Long Island to the Caribbean to the Middle East, and more than 50 large-scale renourishment projects, including one up in the town of Southampton at Bridgehampton and Sagaponack, which was last constructed right at 10 years ago, and we're actually planning on moving to construction there this winter again for a follow-up work. As part of our efforts in shoreline restoration work up and down the East Coast, we have really good standing relationships with FEMA, as well as multiple regulatory environmental agencies. We tend to pride ourselves on our ability to use empirical data, field data, surveys, to come up with solutions for communities that are dealing with problems of coastal erosion or sea level rise or storm damage, any one of a number of impacts that we see up and down the coast. Specific to New York, our experience is primarily in the town of Southampton, at Bridgehampton and Sagaponack, as well as Ashrogan and Quogue. We perform shoreline assessments and minor project work in the Southampton vicinity on top of that large-scale nourishment at Bridge Sag that I just mentioned, and permitting work in both the New York and Buffalo districts of the Army Corps of Engineers. As part of our large-scale nourishment projects that we've completed, not only in New York, but in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, we typically coordinate those designs and post-project monitoring schedules, programs with FEMA to ensure the community is eligible for post-disaster relief funds following impacts from declared federal disasters. So just a short outline of some of our more recent FEMA funding experiences here. You can see we've been fairly successful in getting millions of dollars for multiple communities in the Carolinas, as well as up into New York and Southampton over the years. So a bit of a background about ditch plains here. Y'all are probably somewhat aware of what's happening. A couple of winter storms back to back in December and January of last winter caused pretty considerable damage to the dune right along ditch plains. I'll show you guys some visuals of this in just a moment so you can sort of see it. In spring of 2024, the town of Southampton and our company, Coastal Science and Engineering, entered into agreement for permitting and design for a dune restoration at ditch plains with the express goal of establishing and maintaining FEMA eligibility for those post-disaster funds, to where in the future, if there's another event like this, the town can simply sponsor a post-storm survey, then coordinate with FEMA to be reimbursed for the replacement of the lost dune. Our most recent update is actually just from last week. Looking at my calendar, we obtained an updated survey that we're currently using to draw permit documentation for the State Department of Environmental Conservation to allow for the work to occur at ditch plains. So that's enough words. Let's look at pictures. Our pre-storm condition from about 2020, you can see the profile here shown in yellow with the actual elevations shown with this green curve on the left. The dune crest was at perhaps 15 feet, maybe a little bit less, above approximately mean sea level. And you can see a nice wide beach over 100 feet, closer to 150 feet, going all the way out to mean sea level. Immediately following those storms in February of 2024, the town sponsored a survey with Sea Level Surveying, which is an operation up there on Long Island. And using those data, we were able to demonstrate that the beach was severely eroded. I'm just going to flip back and forth real quick between these. So you can see, you have about 5 feet of vertical loss in the dune itself, right about here. And if you look at where the seaward crest of the dune used to be located to where that elevation is now, you're looking at about 10 feet of vertical change from 2020 to February 2024. And most of that occurred during those storm events in December and January of last winter. This is a problem because, as y'all are well aware, the area between ditch plains and Lake Montauk is pretty low lying. A lot of those are FEMA flood zones, as you can see here on the flood insurance rate map, connecting all the way back to Montauk Highway. There's just a thin little section of the roadway itself where it looks like the road bed is built above the AE zone, which is your high hazard flood zone. And with the dune gone at ditch plains, so we can see here on this elevation profile, the letter A is almost all the way back to Montauk Highway. You're only looking at elevations of about +5 back in the neighborhood between that road and the ocean. And so with this dune that you see here at letter C, this is from the 2020 data. With that now gone, the flood hazard for that neighborhood landward of the ditch plains beach is enhanced. In addition to that flood hazard, visual impacts, aesthetic and environmental impacts on coastal dune habitats are never really desirable. There's a lot of protected species and systems that are contained in coastal dunes. And so generally speaking, it's in the community and the state's interest to promote conservation of those habitats and systems. They deliver a lot of co-benefits, not just the flood reduction or the flood risk reduction, but also ecological benefits to adjacent ecosystems. So what can we do about all of this? Well, we would recommend that the town consider rebuilding the dune at ditch plains. A dune restoration project is eligible for FEMA reimbursement during declared disasters. Based on some FEMA guidance that I'll outline here in just a moment. And we also needed to collect an updated survey. The survey that had been collected in February 2024 was relatively limited. It didn't really go inland or along shore to the east or west of the actual dune. So we didn't have a lot of information on how to tie it in, how to actually generate specific volumes that would be required to get the state permit to actually build the project. So about that FEMA eligibility. So FEMA has very specific quantitative rules on which projects are and are not eligible for federal reimbursements after disaster declarations. And in the case of a dune, their rule is that you need 540 square feet in the profile of the dune above the 1% still water elevations. This is essentially the stormwater level during a 1 in 100 storm, or a 1% probability event on the ocean front. And in the vicinity of Montauk, specifically at Ditch Plains, actually, the Army Corps has already determined that the 1% still water elevation is approximately 9 feet in AVD. In AVD is roughly equivalent to mean sea level. It's a little bit higher just because of sea level rise, honestly, but it's about the same. So about 9 feet above mean sea level. So that means that we would need to place about 54,000 cubic yards along the 2,700 feet that constitute the alongshore length of Ditch Plains. And then once we have that, we have to monitor it every year or so, maybe every 2 years, and maintain that facility is what they call it. Once you establish that facility, that dune, then it's eligible for the reimbursement once you have that 54,000 yards above +9. And you go back, you measure it year to year. And if there's a declared disaster in a given year, you can apply for FEMA reimbursement to fully fund replacement of that lost volume. Our next step is to collect that updated survey that I just mentioned a few minutes ago, and we did that a week ago yesterday on the 7th. You can see here on top is the actual point cloud of points showing the XYZ position. So we have our elevations, we know exactly where we are on the map, and you can see here on the bottom our workflow running from the actual raw point cloud that you see there on top all the way up through a ground surface that gives us a continuous elevation data set across the whole Ditch Plains site. And in sort of perspective, this is a bit of a grainy image, it's a screenshot from a report of this data. You can see we've got a 3-dimensional surface that shows us the elevations across not only the Ditch Plains beach, but just inland and just east and west of it, so we can really understand how to tie this volume in and make sure that we're meeting that FEMA requirement of having 54,000 yards above +9. As part of this analysis, we were also able to compare the 2024 data that was collected last week against 2014, relic data that was just publicly available. And unsurprisingly, here at Ditch Plains, particularly in the vicinity of the beach access over towards the east end of the beach, you've seen pretty significant erosion. And certainly during that 2023-2024 storm event, basically the entire removal of the dune system from that section of the beach. And so that's where we get our increased flood risk hazard and the loss of the functionality of the ecosystem. So we're currently working on a design template to determine how much sand needs to be placed both above mean sea level and above that 9-foot contour in order to maintain or establish and maintain FEMA eligibility. Establishing, exactly where the dune goes is important because the state won't permit the project unless we're able to do that and show them how much sand is going to be placed along, say, 100-foot space transects along the full 2,700-foot length of the project site. A couple of other notes. Again, there's that 9-foot elevation that's very important for establishing and maintaining FEMA eligibility. We're also trying to squeeze that volume in such a way that we're not encroaching on the dry sand beach, that we're not placing any sand below mean high water. We're not trying to encroach on the dry sand beach, or at least we're trying to minimize our encroachment on the dry sand beach because it's a very popular recreational beach. We understand that. We understand that the whole reason why this is a dune project and not a larger scale project is for a variety of reasons, but one of them being that it's a very popular surf spot and you don't want to mess with that surf break. At the same time, avoiding the mean high water line means that you basically eliminate the need to coordinate with the Army Corps of Engineers, which is just another regulatory step. If you stay above mean high water, then you can just coordinate with the state, and it just simplifies the whole process while maintaining that FEMA eligibility. These volumes here are based on the February surface, so they're going to be different just necessarily from the ones that we come up with the analysis we're actually working on this week. We expect to have some preliminary volumes and sections like the one you see here ready to send over to all of the folks at the town that Kate outlined a few minutes ago, and kind of go back and forth on various concerns like the dry beach encroachment or like mean high water, like the crest height elevation. But all the while maintaining, this goal in mind of establishing a FEMA facility and maintaining eligibility for FEMA reimbursements. So that's where we're at. Where we're going is next up, we're trying to coordinate, town personnel are trying to coordinate with adjacent property owners because there will be impacts to the viewshed. You need easements in order to place sand along private properties adjacent to the beach. This is a standard practice across all jurisdictions with projects like this. You need those easements to actually build the project. as part of that sort of planning process, we'll also be applying for the state permit from the DEC using the final volumes that our team is generating this week from that October survey. Once we have the state permit off, once we have the easements settled, then we can start talking about actually planning the project. So we would need to identify sand resources and contractors. So it's my understanding that sand resources have already been identified with upland pits in the area in Eastern Long Island that are already pre-approved by DEC as being beach quality, which is fantastic. We'll just have to make sure that the pits that are identified have enough volume to accommodate the volume that the ditch plains dune will need to establish and maintain that FEMA eligibility. And then once we have the sand resources identified, coordinating with contractors on actual project plans on how you're going to build it. Are you going to stockpile the sand, on the back shore and then scrape it up? Are you going to put it truck by truck and scrape it as you go? Are you going to put it in the parking areas? Is it going to be impacts to access? Things like that are pretty standard logistical considerations for any project like this. Once you sort of have majority of those questions dealt with, some of them are unanswerable until you're actually working through the project on site. Once you have most of those loose ends tied off, you can actually construct the dune. You sculpt the profile according to the design. It's based on the FEMA guidance contained in the document that I showed you all a screenshot of a few minutes ago. And then after that, you use a drone survey to demonstrate that you have that 54,000 cubic yard threshold above the 9-foot elevation contour, and you have your FEMA eligibility. Then at that point, all you have to do is submit a maintenance plan, is what they call it, to FEMA. And this can be a very short document, just a few pages, where the town essentially commits to periodic monitoring of the facility and thresholds at which the town will try to bring either the crest height back up or the width or the volume of the dune back to a certain minimum threshold to maintain that FEMA eligibility. And in the event of a declared disaster or complete loss of the facility, you can then apply for FEMA reimbursement to pay for a reconstruction of the dune in the future, so that the town's not having to necessarily come out of pocket every time this happens like it did last winter. So I know that was a lot of information in a short amount of time. I was told to keep it to about 15 minutes, and I think we're right at 14 and a half or so. So I'll be quiet there and happy to take any questions y'all may have.
So thank you, Patrick, very much. Kathy, if you want to.
Yeah,
David, do you want to jump in?
Well, Kate, thank you for spearheading this. We understand that the storms that we've had over the years, and specifically in December and January of this year, has eroded the primary dune of this location. In some ways, that primary dune was artificially built over years, and artificially just means the sand was there. The littoral drift zone of this area doesn't provide for any sand replenishment in this area in a way that I believe that some type of alternative means of action like we had to do and replenish can be done anymore then too. It's just not what we have on the tip of Long Island. So take an action here to protect the landward community in there is important. I do have concerns about the slope of these dunes and what it will do to the recreational beach. That recreational beach, as we know it right now, is down the hard pan once again after the town put in nearly $300,000 worth of sand to make sure we had a summertime recreational beach. But with the cubic yardage that we're looking at right now, knowing that sand slumps sometimes at a 2-to-1 slope, and you're looking at a 1-to-4 slope maybe on here right now, it looks like it's about an 80-foot dune system they have to put in there where we might not have that much land before it interacts with mean high water. So some of my concerns there are multiple ones. Yes, the protection of the neighborhood. Yes, the protection of the iconic surfing area that's out there, but also the recreational enjoyment of residents and visitors to this location with the design that we have to put forward on there to become FEMA compliant. So these are all these are all questions I think the town board has to understand before they make the final decision to try to end up moving this project forward. But as you're starting to see with case movement here and yourself, Patrick, and the team, it is moving forward to design. But I want to make sure that everyone understands this type of design is going to change that beach area pretty dramatically potentially. But there's positives and negatives of doing it. And as long as we can understand all that and make an educated decision, it will hopefully be the best decision. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, so I agree with David on that, and one of the reasons why we're looking at this particular dune profile at this height is, one, of course, to protect the neighborhood, to give it the strongest protection that we can at this time for storm surge and coastal flooding during storms, but also we have to, as a coastal town, understand the financial burden of these projects upon every municipality. And I know this is a conversation that all municipalities are having on Long Island. Just this project, we were very fortunate to receive a partnership with the state to the tune of $2 million. And that type of funding, which probably be about a match for what we totally have to spend on this in the long run, is essential for us. Where will the funding come from for these nourishment projects to protect our shorelines? FEMA has a program. It's an identified program that will help fund these systems in the event of a disaster, event of a total replenishment. And that's essential for any project, I think, in today's world. Just like the Army Corps, we wouldn't have had $11.5 million to just do their latest nourishment. Patrick, I know, David, I don't know if you want to talk about anything about potentially a betterment for ditch, but I do know, my understanding is that a project like this would help with that type of decision.
So part of the FIMP project, and specifically the FEME project, which is the Fire Island to Montauk, Fire Island to Mauritius Inlet portion of the project, in which covered the downtown Montauk, we actually, under previous administration, requested that the ditch plain area would be added to a potential betterment. Betterment would need to have an engineered design then to be within that betterment. So this might fall directly within that, with an engineered dune that we're looking at. The town board has long-term requested that ditch plains be incorporated into the FEME and the FIMP project. Also, we continue to advocate for that, but that could be years off, in which we can get a fall storm. That could be days off right now. I do believe what we have to continuously to do out there right now is continue with our emergency management procedures. Tom worked on that last year with myself, with plugging the gaps. If we see that there's going to be a storm surge that could overtop those areas, and we know where those points are, the town will continue to do that as we analyze what the best thing to do is. But yes, that's what we know about the betterment. But betterments also cost a lot of money then too. And it could be upwards of, another $4 to $7 million in certain areas, and valuations of that based on the last contract that was used by the contractor, it's only going to increase right now. You're seeing that up west, the project that Patrick just talked about in Sagaponack is going to cost a lot more money. It's not as much easy sand to get to, and the equipment to get that sand out east here takes a beating on it, and I think there's millions of dollars in losses that their contractors taken that they're not going to take anymore. So what I'm going to try to say is it's only going to cost the town more as the years go on than to replenish our beaches, and we have to be financially prepared for that by designing the right thing, but also making sure that we have our finances ready and set for that, and that's still to be determined how we're going to do that.
Yes, and that's why, in understanding that, a basically 20-foot high dune would change view sheds, but we're all going to have to make a decision on whether the protection that we can afford with the financing attached to it to be able to maintain it in the event of a storm, how much are we willing to pay for that, and even in terms of view shed. So these are the challenges that we're facing. We're moving forward with this project. We have a meeting with the regional heads of the DEC on the 24th. Kim Shaw is here in the audience, along with Melissa Winslow from Natural Resources.
Karen.
Melissa McCarran. I got it right the first time, Melissa. We've already put in a preliminary application, and now with this information that we really really, I think this was essential for going forward. I know it took us a little longer than the surveys that we had, but I can't see moving forward without this detail of survey. I think it'll really help us in the end. And we're still planning to move ahead with this project based on town board support. I'm reaching out, I have meetings already set up with the adjacent property owners who will, we would need easements for. That's happening this evening. And I just wanted to give a report of where we are with this project at this moment.
Thank you. I mean,
Go ahead, Tom.
thank you. I mean, I would just add to this that, look, public safety, as I think David and Kate have called out, is number one with regards to doing this. This is to prevent loss of life fundamentally. And I think the onus that we've put on that with regards to this project is strong. I think this also needs to ensure that residents in this area start to adapt as well. You know, we've started to kind of see in our code and how we change code, because look, a dune of this nature will last a certain period of time, but a major storm could have impacts that can overwhelm a dune like this. And, you know, we just need to ensure that everyone living in these areas is aware of the risk and prepared for it. So we've talked that a little bit as well. The other piece I think David called out is the slope here. It does change the nature. It also is going to lead to a limited life of the dune. I mean, gravity is going to play its part. That sand is going to roll down to the ocean over time. So that replenishment piece, it would be interesting if we could get some guidance as to what that replenishment schedule might look like on what we understand to be a normal basis. Are we talking about 3 years out that we're going to have to be replenishing this, or is this an annual piece going on? I mean, I know it's hard to know because we don't know the nature of the storms, but what are we planning for, at least in that sense? And like, how do we begin to financially plan for that if that onus does fall more specifically on the town and we don't get the betterment piece from FEMA, et cetera? So I think there's just some financial planning we need to do around that as well. That's my 2 comments.
So Patrick, do you want to respond? In terms of...
Sure, I mean, yeah, sure. I think as far as maintenance and slope goes, you know, we're actively working on the slope right now. The profile that I showed you guys was a 1-on-4. That's based on guidance from environmental regulators down south where turtle nesting is a concern. And so we can build a steeper slope up on Long Island. In fact, some of the FEMA guidance actually calls for as much as a 1-on-10 slope. And I promise I've climbed a lot of dunes, and plenty of the natural ones have a 1-on-10 slope on the seaward face. It will affect the lifetime of the facility insofar as if you have a steeper slope, then yes, absolutely, it's easier for the material to run out. At the same time, attaching an actual number on how long that's going to last is very difficult without having annual surveys in hand. We know, for instance, that, you know, the loss that occurred last December and January was probably on the order of 20, 30, 40,000 cubic yards. But it's hard to know how much of that occurred before those discrete events because we just don't have the survey data to actually document those changes. What we can do is make assumptions about average erosion rates based on feasibility reports generated by the Army Corps, but those are also going to be imperfect. I would just estimate that no, you won't be rebuilding this every year. You won't be rebuilding this every 2 years. This should be a longer term project. The goal should be to establish a longer term dune. Then with periodic severe impacts during declared disaster events, you can actually receive reimbursement to replace that lost volume. That's the whole idea. And as David kind of alluded to, all of this is sort of almost positioned, if you will, as a stopgap against the potential of being included in an Army Corps project in the future. We see a lot of communities that have to do this and sort of, you know, pony up, if you will, in the meantime until the federal project includes them within their template. Now that is a little bit out of our control, but in the meantime, it's what the town can actually do to try to help the people that live behind the dune.
I'll put down 15.
Thank you.
The one thing, we talked about 2,700 feet, but I don't think we showed a map that showed exactly the area we're looking at as define the 2,700 feet shoreline.
We're also looking to I'll jump in here for a sec. We're also just looking to maintain, this dune will be designed to maintain the public access points. And then, as David alluded before, will be designed to be plugged up, those access points plugged up during an event.
And that's part of what Patrick was discussing. We would have to go for FEMA. We have to go with an O&M on there in our annual surveys or periodic surveys, I think was the word you might use.
If you guys have copies of the slides, there is a draft profile or plan form drawing of the dunes location on slide number 10, the project approach, what can be done. It's an orange yellow polygon.
We have to look for slide 10 because your page numbers didn't make it to the printed versions.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
I don't know what happened.
So primarily,
Project approach, Patrick?
Yes.
If you can pull that up.
Sure, here. Let me share my screen. There you go.
so primarily it's the location that would go from the road end of affectionately called Dirt Lot, just to a little bit to the west of Seaview Ave. Yeah, I think Seaview Ave. Seaside.
Yeah.
Seaside, sorry.
Yeah. So from the dirt lot here to here.
And why the recommendation for, obviously the dirt lot makes a lot of sense, but why all the way, why 2700, why just west of Seaside Avenue?
So the 2,700-foot project length was originally developed by Dr. Henry Bokinevich from Stony Brook, who I believe the town worked with earlier this year to develop a basic sort of framework for where sand could be placed to help mitigate the loss of the dune. And that would have been based on the survey completed back in February, where that was the alongshore length that was shown to have the greatest losses following that storm event. It essentially connects the two bluffs on either end of Ditch Plains.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Patrick, is there any thought given in the plan to mitigate potential impacts from the hardened structures to the east on the erosion of the beaches here or the dunes?
No, that's a really good question. We would be very interested to learn more about that, but we would need an in-water bathymetric survey to be able to actually do that effectively. And I've talked with our surveyor at Boat Hampton. Just the logistics of getting on top of a rocky shelf like that with a survey boat are pretty complicated, as you might imagine. As far as the impacts of that hard bottom on the dune itself, no, we haven't looked at that. We would need a survey to be able to even begin to address that question. In general, whenever you see bluff shorelines like this with exposed rock and hard bottom kind of on either side, more so to the east, you tend to have the beach in between have relatively low loss rates because it's more of a pocket beach. And so as a result, until you have a storm event that's so intense that it removes the sand completely beyond those rocks, then the volume tends to be conserved, which is a good thing, actually.
Thank you.
Sure.
Are there other questions for Patrick?
No.
Is the board supportive with moving forward?
Yeah.
I'm supportive of moving forward, discussing this with property owners and keeping to see exactly what the slope's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things we might want to do for the public is if you sort of look in this room right now, a 20-foot dune is going to be up to the first rafter in an area about the same width of here, maybe a little bit greater than that. There's not that much beach down there for this amount of sand. So it could be startling to some. So one of the ways we might want to go out there is put a temporary cross-section of it so people can individuals can understand what the dune is going to potentially look like if we go forward with a full FEMA designed dune.
I mean, as an analogy, you could kind of say, look at that dune in front of the IGA in Montauk. That's probably about 20 feet. So that's realistically what you're going to be looking at as a structure.
But with more than double the width.
Right.
So that's what I would want to make sure that people understand, that it's going to be a very high peak dune with a very high slope on it. But these are the things we have to discuss. So
Yep.
Kate, thank you very much.
I mean, there's, when we look at the reality of sea level rise, the storm surges, the intensity of storms, the frequency of storms, we're going to have to take a hard look at what we value in terms of our shoreline, whether it's keeping it as it was historically, which is absolutely impossible, or, dealing and changing along with the reality that we're faced with. So these are decisions that we're going to have to make, not just in ditch plains, but everywhere along our coastline.
Okay. Well, Patrick, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Patrick.
Bye.
Okay, so next up, we have Tina Lagaran, our acting planning director, to present the new Senior Center SEQR. Welcome, Tina and Ryan.
Thank you, Supervisor. Good afternoon or morning, town board members. Let me just make sure Ryan can get this up. Share the screen. Thank you. I'm here today to talk about the environmental review for the Senior Center. The Planning Department has prepared the EAF Part 2 impact assessment for the board's review and consideration. After some background on the project and the SEQR process for the project, the presentation is going to walk through the details of the Part 2 assessment that the Planning Department has prepared for the board's consideration. And I'll talk through the logic supporting the assessments we've put forth in this round of the documentation.
Great.
Next slide. A brief project description to refresh on the high-level scope of the project. The proposed action involves a subdivision to create an approximately 7-acre parcel and to fund, construct, and operate the new 22,000 square foot senior center facility. The site would be developed with the building, parking, and other improvements such as driveways and an ADA walking path. On the next slide, you'll see the location of the project. To provide the context for the environmental review, the site setting is important. The site is located with access to Abraham's Path and Amagansett. To the south are the LIRR tracks and residential properties. To the east is a horse farm. To the north are other town recreational facilities, including the Abraham's Path Recreation Park with the Terry King ball fields and sport time indoor rink. To the west is the Lee Hayes Youth Park and additional tennis and recreational facilities and residences. You can see the sites outlined in blue there. Next slide is the site plan. Again, just to refresh on what the site plan is looking like. There's a long flag lot entrance, and parking areas are on the north and south of the parcel, as well as located within the flag strip. The building is sited somewhat centrally on the rectangular portion of the site, and the site driveway surrounds 3 sides of the building with the ADA walking path in the southeastern site area. Areas on the southwest and northeast will remain undisturbed. Now to focus a little bit more on the environmental review. The construction of the senior center is a discretionary action of the town board, meaning that compliance with the New York State Environmental Quality Review, or SEQR, is required. As the town board knows, SEQR requires that agencies take a hard look at the potential for environmental impacts prior to the commitment to undertake a discretionary action. In order to prepare this assessment, the Planning Department has reviewed the plan and analyses associated with the project, and these are available for review in the Planning Department, and I know the board is familiar with them as well. In SEQR, early in the process requires that actions be classified as either unlisted type 1 or type 2. There are lists of type 2 and type 1 actions in the state law. Type 2 actions are presumed to have no impact on the environment based on the criteria in the law. Type 1s are listed in 617.4 and are larger actions that require environmental review. Unlisted is the largest category because they include all actions not specifically listed. The senior center is a type 1 action for the reasons noted on this slide. In SEQR, when a site is adjacent to parkland, the thresholds for type 1 are reduced to 25% of what they are normally. If we were not next to parkland, the threshold for the type 1 for the project would be physical disturbance of 10 acres. But because we are next to the parkland, the physical disturbance triggered is 25% of that 10, or 2.5 acres. We do exceed that here with approximately 5.5 acres of disturbance proposed. Next, once an action is classified as type 1, that triggers the requirements for a coordinated review and the use of the full environmental assessment form. A coordinated review entails transmission of the EAF Part 1 to all involved agencies, notifying them that a lead agency must be agreed on within 30 days. The lead agency is the agency primarily responsible for determining whether the action will have a significant environmental impact. And involved agencies are agencies that have discretionary authority over an action, like a formal permit or approval. The town board conducted a coordinated review and was confirmed as the appropriate SEQR lead agency for this action per the DEC commissioner letter dated May 3rd, 2024. Back in time. Regarding the full EAF. The full EAF has 3 parts. Part 1 is a robust 13-page form that contains detailed information on the project site, its setting, construction, and operational impacts that was prepared earlier this year. Part 2 is the identification of potential impacts, and that is what I'm presenting to the board today that the planning department has prepared in draft form. And I'll explain the logic and reasoning behind how the form has been filled out. Part 3 is the determination of significance, and that would be the next step after the board considers the information in the Part 2 that we'll discuss today. As the SEQR lead agency, the town board must determine the significance of the action in writing. And this is to be based on a review of the EAF, other project documents, and a thorough analysis of the relevant areas of environmental concern. I want to just explain some of the terminology I'll use. Significant adverse impacts is an important concept in SEQR, and the criteria to consider when making this decision is listed in the SEQR law in 617.7C. Because this term is associated with something substantial and adverse in SEQR, I just want to, as I use the term today, I'm using it in the SEQR sense, not the common parlance. People sometimes get confused between those two. So the remainder of the presentation is going to go through the full EAF in detail, and now I'm just going to explain what it is before I start digging into the technical analysis. The Part 2 form is a series of 18 environmental categories and a detailed listing of impact criteria in each. You'll see on the form that for each of the impact criteria, there are 2 choices regarding how to characterize the criteria. The lead agency must consider if there are no to small or moderate to large impacts and choose one of those when the criteria is applicable to the project. The decision must be based on the entire action, all the project information, long and short-term cumulative impacts. In order to guide this decision, there's EAF workbooks available on the DEC website that provides general guidelines and criteria that the lead agency can consider when filling this form out. One important piece of guidance that applies to the entirety of the categories in the form is that when a numerical standard in one of the impact criteria is exceeded, the lead agency is supposed to check moderate to large impact for that criteria. Note that a moderate to large impact does not mean it is a significant adverse impact, which is the SEQR trigger for an EIS and indicative of substantial adverse change. It only means that it could be moderate to large, and the lead agency should consider mitigation, minimization techniques for that situation. Aside from that guidance, general practice in the SEQR form and the SEQR in general is to consider the scale, frequency, and magnitude, as well as the context of the impacts. The remainder of the presentation is going to dig into the 18 categories and present the category by category information that we've considered in filling out this form for presentation to the board, whether or not they agree with the assessments as the planning department has suggested them. Ultimately, it is the board who's responsible for the content of the EAF. A note on some of the Part 2 categories that are not applicable to the proposed action. Categories 2, 5, 6, and 16, we did not check anything associated with these. They won't be discussed further, and the reasons why are listed on this slide. The numbering and the heading of each of the slides that follows corresponds to the form numbering, the Part 2 form itself. So I'm going to skip these numbers. It's not a typo. It's just we're skipping so we can stay true to the form. So number 1, land. This category focuses on physical alterations proposed associated with the proposed project. For this category, we did indicate 2 moderate to large impacts for 2 of the criteria based on the numerical thresholds in the form. These impacts, however, are effectively addressed by environmental protections built into the project scope, or they are appropriate based on the project scope, as follows. Sub-question B, project will involve construction on slopes 15% or greater. This was checked moderate to large. The site does have a significant amount of slopes located throughout, but minimizing impacts to them has been accomplished by siting the building on the flattest part of the site. The project engineers have estimated that there's only about 4,800 square feet of impact to slopes 15% or greater. That's only 2% of the total disturbance. So there has been significant efforts made to minimize disturbance to those areas. In addition, the project involves the development and implementation of a stormwater pollution prevention plan, or a SWIP, and that will reduce concerns regarding soil erosion and sedimentation. The other moderate to large impact was checked for item E, which is the project involves phased construction occurring for more than 1 year. This was checked based on the numerical threshold exceedance because construction is planned in 2 phases and is longer than 1 year at about 20 months of active construction work. The phasing has been implemented due to restrictions on when clearing is allowed due to concerns for the northern long-eared bat, or NLEB. The phasing plan supports compliance with the DEC clearing window, which is appropriate. Phase 1 is approximately 3 months and will include clearing, removal of existing on-site trees and shrubs, and site stabilization. Phase 2 will occur over an approximate 17-month period and will consist of the development of the senior center building and the rest of the site work. At 20 months of active construction, it's not excessive for a project of this scope. And these are actually the only 2 moderate to large impacts I identified in the assessment. The remainder have been recommended as fitting into the no or small impacts category, and we'll hear why as I continue. So skipping item 2, geology, because it's not applicable, we're at item 3, surface water. And there are no surface water bodies in proximity to this location, but we did check this box just to be able to disclose that the SWIP is being implemented and is appropriate to minimize concerns regarding soil erosion and sedimentation, as well as to talk about site stormwater drainage, which will be fully contained on site. The structures are designed in accordance with town standards and will manage a 3-inch rainfall event. Moving on to groundwater. The project will utilize a Suffolk County Water Authority water main supply already present on Abraham's Path, which is appropriate. And the proposed sanitary density flow is 3,965 gallons per day, or GPD. The total allowable sanitary density flow for the parcel would be 4,200 GPD. So the proposed is below the allowable, which is appropriate. The project proposes a new IAOWTS treatment system, which will provide for a high level of nitrogen removal from the discharges, which is also appropriate. A geothermal well system will also be in place. It is a closed loop system with no discharges or other groundwater impacts. The system will reduce the energy demand of the building, which is a beneficial impact in that regard. Skipping 5 and 6, flooding and air quality respectively, as the proposed action did not meet the thresholds for consideration in the form. And regarding plants and animals, the proposed action does include clearing on the site. Review of the wooded areas currently located there indicate that the woodlands are consistent with many of the woodlands in town. Trees consist predominantly of oak with some pine. Other species found in smaller numbers include sassafras, American beech, which we did find to be impacted by beech leaf disease, black cherry, hickory, American holly, and eastern red cedar. Some invasive shrubs of burning bush and Japanese holly are also present, and no trees that would be considered rare or unique have been identified. The site is impacted by heavy deer browse activity based on our field assessments. Regarding animal species presence, the entire town is located in northern long-eared bat potential habitat, according to applicable DEC mappers. This species has recently been changed in regulatory status from threatened to endangered, which does enhance the assessment approach that we took when considering the potential impacts due to northern long-eared bat. We've coordinated with NYSDEC, the Department of Environmental Conservation, who would typically be the only agency we'd work with, as there are no federal permits required here. DEC has issued a letter stating that no incidental take permit was necessary from them, and that to avoid endangered species take or the need for an incidental take permit, no tree cutting activities can be conducted on the project site between the dates of March 1st and November 30th. All tree clearing will be confined to this time period as DEC has prescribed. We've also coordinated with the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. This is in an abundance of caution and recognizing that the recent change in species status warranted a thorough analysis. U.S. Fish and Wildlife issued a letter in August indicating that the town should conduct an internal review, and that following this, we may want to pursue a voluntary incidental take permit process. Once we received this feedback, we engaged qualified biologists to prepare a biological assessment report for the subject property in accordance with the applicable federal guidelines. The findings of the biological assessment report are as follows. The report did find that the site contains potential northern long-eared bat roosting and foraging habitat, but that it is surrounded by existing developments, including recreational, commercial, and residential uses, in addition to the Long Island Railroad tracks, which may reduce its suitability as habitat. Larger contiguous areas of protected open space are also located within the vicinity of the proposed project, and it is anticipated that those can continue to provide habitat for the NLEB and reduce concerns regarding the proposed clearing at this location. The proposed project will also retain 1.5 acres of existing vegetation, and clearing is proposed to be limited to the restricted clearing window when NLEB are not anticipated to be active, and in accordance with the DEC guidance and their determination that no incidental take permit was required. The BA report, biological assessment report, thus concluded that the proposed action was not expected to result in loss of essential habitat or take of northern long-eared bat individuals. Given those conclusions, submission of an application for incidental take of northern long-eared bat was not recommended by the report, and no significant adverse impacts were anticipated. Moving on to agriculture, the project is adjacent to a horse farm, but this use is not expected to represent any concerns to that adjacent agricultural use. The boundary of the site with the horse farm is going to be shielded by a row of evergreen trees. That is going to substantially buffer the views from the horse farm to the senior center facility. Levels of activity at the proposed center are expected to be substantially internal, and those external activities not of a level of magnitude that would be intrusive to surrounding land uses. Regarding aesthetics, the site is not located in a designated scenic or aesthetic resource area. As shown on the site location plan, the site is a flag lot with a very long access driveway, so views from Abraham's Path will be quite limited and likely mostly just of the entranceway and sign. The building and solar canopies are likely going to be visible from parcels adjacent to the rectangular portion of the lot. However, these are going to be partially buffered by landscaping, and to the south are substantially buffered by the railroad tracks and the railroad right-of-way. The residential land uses to the southeast are not public vantage points in any case. Solar is a key component of the energy strategy for the property, and siting them on the roof minimizes their visual prominence. Regarding historic and archaeological resources, the site is located in an archaeologically sensitive buffer zone based on the State Historic Preservation Office Cultural Resource Information System, also called CRIS. Due to the fact that it was undeveloped and within this potentially sensitive location, the town engaged qualified archaeologists who then undertook a Phase 1A documentary research and Phase 1B testing studies effort. The studies concluded that no further testing is necessary. No resources or historic sensitivities were found. I reviewed the report and concurred with the findings. SHPO also reviewed and concurred with the findings. No significant adverse impacts anticipated due to that issue. Regarding open space and recreation, the site is adjacent to the Abraham's Path Recreation Park, also the Lee Hayes Youth Parks to the west, and additional recreation facilities, including recreational facilities, including the tennis courts, are across Abraham's Path. Construction period disturbances to these types of use can be expected. However, they will be temporary, confined to the 20-month active construction period, and occurring, during weekdays 7 to 4. Importantly, the center will be a new recreational resource for the town senior population. The project adds recreational facilities in the town, which is a benefit to that type of category. Regarding critical environmental areas, the site is located in the South Fork Critical Groundwater Area, South Fork Groundwater Protection Area, SGPA, the purpose of which is to protect groundwater. As discussed earlier, the project does include appropriate groundwater protection methods and construction controls, including the SWIP, which will prevent erosion and sedimentation, and the IAOWTS, which is the appropriate sanitary treatment facility for this type of project. And again, the sanitary density flow is allowed, the level is allowed by the county, which is appropriate. Regarding transportation, LKMA has prepared a traffic impact assessment. The peak trips for this facility are expected to be between 28 and 100 trips, but these do not coincide with peak hours of traffic in the vicinity of the facility. Based on the analyses in the study, there will not be an impact to the level of service conditions at the nearby intersections. Regarding parking, there are 156 total parking spaces, including 11 accessible spaces and 6 EV charging ones. Parking calculations were done by analyzing the space types and maximizing the parking that could be located on the site while balancing the areas to remain undisturbed. With respect to energy, the facility aspires to be net zero, as you all know. The electric demand is going to be offset by solar power and the geothermal system, which will provide for heating and cooling. No upgrades are triggered to energy infrastructure. With respect to noise, odor, and light, there's no anticipated light spill based on the photometric plan prepared by the engineers. The lights will be LED and dark sky compliant. There also are no odors generated from the facility. With respect to noise, we look at 3 different types of conditions for noise. The first is construction, which I expected typically involves more site activity than generally expected with trucks and equipment traversing the site. However, it's a temporary condition enduring for the 20-month active construction period. Next, operations. And as I mentioned, most of the activities are expected to be indoor with outdoor opportunities like site navigation, low intensity walking, meetings, and small events, generally non-intrusive. And it's a large site, not expected to intrude on other sites located nearby. During emergencies, there will be an on-site generator that will enable the site to continue to function, providing essential services during power outages. The generator has to be tested monthly, and that will occur during daytime hours. During the testing, daytime noise code will be complied with at the adjacent property lines. During periods confined to nighttime emergency operations, which are expected to be infrequent and of limited duration while power is restored, noise code exceedances of 11 dBA and 7 dBA at the Abraham's Path Recreation Park and the Horse Farm, respectively, are expected. While these nighttime noise levels are beyond the code limits, the duration and frequency with which they occur should be rare, and the geographic area of impact is localized. The project design also includes mitigation. The generator is enclosed in a noise container and then will be surrounded on 3 sides by a large wall with sound attenuating properties. With these measures in place, the noise emissions from the generator have been significantly reduced. And with the limited frequency and duration of the exceedances, I'd recommend these are not significant adverse impacts. Skipping 16, which is human health. This is regarding community plans. The senior center is a land use that's going to be a community recreational resource. Other recreational resources in the vicinity I've already discussed: Abraham's Path, Terry King, Sport Time Indoor, tennis facilities on the across the Abraham's Path, and Lee Hayes Youth Park. The center is a community resource consistent with these other land uses. We don't have a zoning designation in our code that directly fits these types of uses, but many communities do. And the American Planning Association does have community facilities in their land-based classification system. They're an important part of the community experience. So obviously they're prominent in other places, and it's good to have like uses cited together. Importantly, the project is also consistent with Goal 10 of the 2005 Comprehensive Plan. the entirety of which is pasted on the slide, but basically the goal is to provide adequate facilities for senior care, recreation, healthcare needs, among others. Lastly, with respect to community character, the action is not in sharp contrast to the surrounding uses as described. It's a land use consistent with other nearby community recreational facilities and resources. In addition, based on the outreach and analysis conducted by the board, the existing senior center is inadequate for the town's seniors' needs. The proposed center has increased by approximately 10,000 square feet. The size and design have been driven by the growing need for this service in the town of East Hampton, based on demographic changes, coupled with the need for modern approaches to address the needs of the population, including nutrition, wellness, and community. It does not create a new demand for services, but it does meet a demand for services. The site activities are expected to be largely indoor and not intrusive to surrounding locations. And that completes my overview of the draft form. If you have any questions.
Does anyone have questions for Tina?
First, I just want to say thank you for putting together like this. It's a really strong presentation and very, very helpful as a new board member to kind of go through it in this way. So I appreciate it. On slide 12, it's just caught my attention given the previous discussion we've had with regard to the stormwater management system. The town standards to manage a 3-inch storm event. So that's in a 24-hour period, correct?
I believe so, yes.
I mean, so that would just be something that just would concern me slightly, given what we saw this summer, where we had like the 9 and the 11-inch rainfall events happening up the island. Just whether we want to have a plan that's maybe a little bit more protective to the center itself in the event of a major event. That would be my only comment there.
I think it's, we had that whole conversation about climate change, right? Many of the engineering standards that we use are outdated, right? For this site and for all of them. So I think you raise an important point, and I think one of the things we need to do is look at, do we want to raise the town standards? But that's a whole other conversation, right? I mean, 3 inches, I believe, is actually above the town standard, which is 2, right? So we actually
1.5 is actually sometimes what the DOT does.
Yeah, right. So we actually did go a little bit above on this location. I think considering the slopes and all that, it's warranted. But typically what we do is 2.
I think what Tom mentioned is if we're doing this once and if we want to put in another galley to collect more rainfall, it's a little deeper. It's the cheapest time is to do it now for maybe predicting. And I think it'll be a very, very minor amount of money for this if we were just put in another ring or 2 at that time. So it's well taken. Sorry, excuse me. I know, and that's in the design, maybe not. Yeah. So.
I have no questions on the SEQR presentation, which is what we're discussing, and the SEQR analysis. And I thank you for your thorough presentation. It really does help digest what's on the form. That if you've done this for a while, you're used to this form. But I think it's beneficial for the public and the community to have a deeper understanding of the form and the work that's put into to come to the. It's not just checking boxes. These are very in-depth assessments that are done to finally check that box. And I appreciate you explaining that.
Thank you.
I also like how we're exactly. Kudos. Well done.
Thank you. Maybe this is our new template moving forward, because this was really helpful, Tina.
Great.
Yeah, and the use of the action, of the community resources, I think is extremely important for the town moving forward as this is going to be one of the greatest community resources, but we have so many other ones that are out there that we have to analyze them too. So thank you for bringing that action and that discussion point into this presentation.
Yeah, I agree. We're really analyzing community benefits, community resources within a definition that doesn't fit. So I would say outside of the SEQR conversation, that's a positive to move forward on as well.
So you're suggesting that we modify the code to address and define a community resource?
Absolutely. I think it's missing in the code.
I don't have any questions, but just like the other board members, just like to say thank you. That was a great presentation and very helpful.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tina. So Rob, what our next steps are?
for the negative declaration.
So the board will have make that decision after, looking at any other documentation that needs to be done, that we would come back and do a negative declaration for SEQR and move forward with the project. Okay, terrific. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Tina, Ryan. Okay, so last up, we have draft legislation for the increased density for non-senior affordable housing projects. Rob, I know this was something that Eric had worked on. He's away this week, but we didn't want to lose momentum because our next meeting isn't until November 12th, so we wanted to keep this going. Eric had circulated a memo, and because the last time we spoke about this, it was in a PowerPoint form, so we needed to see it laid out as the draft town code. I don't know, Ian, if there was anything you wanted to say to set this up.
Sure. Yeah, we looked at this once before. The core of this sort of mirrors the senior affordable housing density that we raised from 8 to 12 units. That was an obvious choice because of health department standards and traffic guidelines. This is extending that to all affordable housing developments, and I think it's appropriate. We had a fairly robust conversation at the last presentation. This just wraps in those comments. And as the memo illustrates, there's a few housekeeping things that just clarify the code in terms of what the standards are. But the core of it is to allow a density of 12 as opposed to 8, so long as you have sewage treatment, a traffic study, and other safeguards in place. And I'm supportive of sending this to the planning board for comments and hopefully moving it to public hearing.
All right.
I would agree with it, and I think some of the changes that were discussed in the last public discussion are encapsulated in here also then too, and those are certain safeguards that will also continue to allow things to be affordable, but also to make sure that the community is protected in the potential surrounding area. So I would like to see what the planning board would like to see on this.
And as we discussed, if we go from 8 to 12 units per acre, it requires a special permit.
Yeah, it's a special permit, and beyond that, there are very clear guidelines, such as having a wastewater treatment plant, doing a traffic study, an economic study, to make sure the impacts are acceptable.
And there still is a cap. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah, the 60 cap. Yeah, the 60 cap that currently is a cap for affordable developments doesn't change.
I'm supportive of going forward, moving forward to the planning board memo, and also to go to public hearing.
Likewise. Same. Yep.
All right.
I didn't have to do much there then.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks for teeing that up.
Well, no, in all seriousness, you did, and it's important. We had a conversation about a concept. I think what we're doing here is showing that ultimately the words in the code are what's going to dictate what happens. So it's important, and I think Rob and his office helping us harness our ideas is an important part of the process. So don't sell yourself short, Rob.
Okay, now we're up to the liaison report portion of our agenda.
I'll keep this quick. This week, just a reminder, the Armaganted Advisory Committee is meeting next Monday, 6:30 p.m. at the Armaganted School Library. Business Committee is meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. Brooks Park Committee is meeting tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. That looks like it's going to be by Zoom now. I will send out confirmation tomorrow morning. And just to remind my colleagues, I will not be here for Thursday's board meeting.
All right, hold on. You caught me. Thank you very much. I hope everyone had a nice weekend. I did. In recreation, you can sign up for the turkey trot. Ian already has. That's coming up at Thanksgiving. Also, you can do that online right now. There is a 5K and a 10K. Again, remember, all the proceeds. So this goes to the town's local, split equally between the town's local food banks. We're working also on a new policy for our parks, our locations in relationship to thunder and inclement weather. I think that's important to move forward. We start to see that in some of our higher education athletics, and we might want to continue to look at that for here in our recreation. Also, I have some draft language I'd like to bring to the board potentially in November or early December about language about dune crossings and crossing our dunes only in our public areas, only in our designated locations. This will give some more teeth for our Marine Patrol and our enforcement agents to be able to make sure people don't walk over our dunes, as they're super important, particularly as we continue to build them. Stay on the designated path on there, but some people just don't listen all the time. In aquaculture, we are currently seeding of clams and mussels. They're almost completely finished with that, and very shortly they will continue to start to work for working on our kelp culturing, which is a new form of our culture and mariculture, I think is extremely important. Last week, the Nature Preserve Committee met. We're discussing multiple things there, but one of them is coming back and discussing about our deer exclosures, one of them that we installed up on the trail up by the Vanscoy Cemetery. And then we also are discussing about our management plans for some of the newly purchased properties that the town has on Gerard Drive then too. And this is a location that we'll be actively working with the Economic Protection Committee, as some members are part of that then too. So that'll be coming forward, hopefully potentially for this spring then too. Currently, we're still moving forward with some of the designs for multi-use fields at Stephen Hans Path, the Abraham Hans Path Comfort Station, and then also for pickleball. A FEMI update, Fire Island and Montauk Merchants Inlet. That was the Army Corps project from this past spring. We had our 6-month walkthrough recently with a contractor and DEC and Army Corps, and this specifically was looking at the survival rate of the fencing and also for the beach grass. I want to thank the supervisor for advocating with the town board for increasing use of our dune fencing, because without that, there would have been a lot more trampled growth there. And as we know, beach grass is extremely important to the longevity and catching of sand for coastal storms. I personally have some concerns here about some of the claims of one of the former speaker that we had today. One of them is our town's finances remain strong and not in a deficit. And also, I think there might have been a violation of one of Chapter 25, the Code of Ethics, and some of the comments then too. I'll take that up later on with town attorneys. Lastly, this week is homecoming for Bonnet Tech, East Hampton High School. I am a member of that class in 1994. Yes, do the math if you want. And, I have kids there. Right, thank you. This year, homecoming is happening on this Saturday. 1:00 game is down at Herrick Park right now. Joe McKee and his squad are playing a great level of football this year. It's nice to see the football team being successful, but we have other great teams being successful and coming to the end of their seasons. So as I said a long time ago, and I know I looked over the clerks then, and too, there's a lot of other wonderful sports happening out here right now, not just in the high school, the Montauk Mustangs, the Springs Osprey, the East Hampton Bonnickers, all the way through. Please go visit them for anywhere from women's field hockey, girls and boys volleyball. Boys soccer is doing great then too. You know, girls soccer's out there. Let's go out and enjoy these kids and these kids' sports as they hopefully continue on to potentially playoff appearances. But what also happens every year, not every year, but most recently, is that we do East Hampton High School sports dedications for the Hall of Fame. And there's 3 individuals going to there. The first one this year is a class of 2012 member named Cole Brower. Cole Brower, she sailed her 40-foot racing boat, First Light, which completed a 130-day around-the-world journey and placed second in the Global Solo Challenge, becoming the first American woman to race nonstop around the world by herself. She grew up on Acabana Creek. Congrats to Cole Brower on that then, too. Second is another girl from the class of 2012, Ashley West Harvey. She participated in East Hampton High School girls track and field. She was all state and all county here. She ran at Susquehanna University and earned all-American honors. She was also the Paul Yusko Award recipient, which goes to the best male or female athlete. And I believe her brother also was put into the Sports Hall of Fame, Brandon, from years ago, from a soccer player who was a really great soccer player. Next is the 1995 baseball team. They had a 12-4 record. And they were Suffolk County Small Schools Champion that year, coached under Coach Jim Nicoletti. Coach did a great job. Members included Vinny Alversa, who is the current high school baseball coach, Keith Corso, Dennis Dunn, RJ Etzel, Brendan Fennell, Guy Facito. These names are funny because these are the guys I hung out with in high school. Matt Fromm, Jake Katz, Troy Lamonda, Tommy McGinty, Henry Meyer, Robbie Peters, Steve Puglia, and Alex Walters Jr. Many of them are still in the area then too. So congratulations to them all. Lastly, I would like to put a plug in for my high school coach, who is not in the Hall of Fame, but I think should be, for girls, John Goodman. He actually coached girls and men's tennis from 1975 to 1999, including the league championship team in 1994, what I participated in. So the next time the evaluation committee gets together, check out John Goodman. Coach, I hope you're hearing. And that's all I have for the day.
So I just wanted to say, so the homecoming starts with the Hall of Fame induction.
Correct.
Then they move outside and have the parade.
Yep.
From the high school to Herrick Park, and then the game is at 1:00. So
Right. Yeah, come cheer for
hopefully
Bonnet,
we'll
yeah.
see everybody at the parade
And that's all.
and at the
Thank
football
you.
game. Thank you.
David, I support you for town historian in the future.
Oh, no, not that. I mean, but town.
I always learn something
Town
from
pump
you.
you up right now for homecoming. I'll do that. You got me there.
I'm always learning something about our history. I have a brief liaison report. I've met with members of the community who asked for a meeting, including Chris Ganich, Sarah Davidson, Jane Meering, Len Green. I'll take another look at our leaf blower regulations. They're going to be asking my colleagues for meetings to talk about these, some of their ideas. I know this came out of Sarah Davison a number of years ago. We talked about when leaves fall as opposed to when we're banning leaf blowers. It seems to be a little bit out of whack, and then they'll have some recommendations for phase outs. They'll also be presenting these ideas to the Energy and Sustainability Committee. I'm meeting, as I said, we're still meeting weekly with Coastal Science and Engineering on the Ditch Plains Dune project, which was subject of a presentation today, and with neighbors who have been impacted. I also made sure that other neighbors in Ditch Plains had this presentation and were aware of our topic today, as well as CCOM, who have all asked to be updated on anything that we hear about this. We also had another meeting for the New York State Department of State grant and shaping that grant, and which is a grant for $600,000 grant that we received from the state for coming up with coastal resiliency plans, including building and zoning code changes, emergency preparedness plans for an area, a Montauk business area. I don't call it downtown Montauk because it goes all the way up to Industrial Road and beyond, where we have critical infrastructure. That is an ongoing process, and hopefully next month or in December, we'll have a full presentation by the group. Next, I will be participating in Reader Participation Day at Montauk School, reading to school children. I just want to shout out to everyone maybe it's a good time to think about grabbing a book with your kids besides recreating and homecoming, and sharing some fiction and taking some travels inside with your kids or anyone. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you, Kate. Ian?
The Spring CAC will meet next Monday, October 28th. I guess that's 2 Mondays, actually. I apologize. We are sort of a nomadic CAC committee right now. That meeting will likely be at Duck Creek, potentially Ashwag Hall. We're just trying to clarify scheduling. If anybody's interested to attend, please feel free to reach out to me or the chairwoman, Lauren Bolger, for a location. But that'll be at 6 p.m. on October 28th. The CAC has moved to the 4th Monday now, as opposed to a Tuesday, just so everybody knows. Trying to free up some other conflicts where people wanted to attend other meetings on the same night. I had a very productive meeting with the Maidstone Park Playground Committee, as well as Steve O'Brien from Parks Department. I'm looking forward to presenting a plan here, hopefully in November. We've settled on the fact that the existing equipment there is in relatively good shape and with some minor repairs can remain. One of the focal points of that playground that we're developing will be a swing set, which has sort of been universally requested by everybody talked to, with some other pieces of equipment. And we're also trying to keep the playground to feel as natural as possible. So the surface material will likely be FIBAR, which looks like wood chips, but is actually a more technical surface for safety. So again, I look forward to presenting that soon to everybody here, but was very pleased with the way that meeting went. I also visited the fire department, the Springs Fire Department, last week, and I just want to say thanks for inviting me there as the Springs Liaison. It was really nice to be able to speak to them. You know, they do so much for our community. And I was happy to be able to present some ideas on the New York Forward grant we're applying for that is right in their area, as well as some other initiatives that I think are important to that community. And I just want to keep open lines of communication, again, for an organization that does so much for us. Lastly, this is our New York Forward grant is due this week, and Sam is working hard. We had a committee meeting on that as well. And it was another one of those moments where I was so encouraged by our community that many, many people came out with very constructive ideas and participating, and it was nice to see. Again, it's a bit of a long shot that we get that grant, but I think whatever happens in the end, the process of meeting and talking about it bodes well for us, whatever happens with this particular grant.
Ian, is the survey closed now?
The survey is closed. At last check, I think we had 200 responses. It was less than that, but maybe it's even more.
That's a wonderful number.
Really wonderful. We've got some letters of support. And again, just, business owners, individuals. If we're able to win this grant, I think there'll be a lot of work on being more specific of exactly what happens. But the community approach and some community members who were put on this committee really helped get the word out there, and it was just really encouraging to see.
Terrific. Thank you. So I just wanted to share the East Hampton Town Police Department statistics for last weekend. This is Friday at 6 a.m. to Monday at 6 a.m. There were 180 calls for service, including 4 residential noise complaints and 2 commercial noise complaints, but both of those were at decibel level readings under the limits. There were 12 motor vehicle accidents, 30 medical aided cases, 25 citations issued, and 5 arrests, 4 of which were aggravated unlicensed. The Montauk Fall Festival and the Tyler Valchek Car Show and Rally were well attended and went off without any issue. Just wanted a reminder, because I know that there's still a couple of CAC meetings left for October. Please, I'm just making a pitch, talk about the criteria for lowering speed limits so that we can come back to our meeting in November and kind of tie up loose ends there. Just want to remind everyone about 2 upcoming public hearings. The first one is this Thursday, October 17th at 6 p.m., and that is for the potential acquisition of 66 Wainscott Main Street. That's the 30 acres there on Wainscott Pond. And then on Thursday, November 7th, there's a public hearing for the Community Development Block Grant Funds. We're expecting about $100,000 in federal money, and just wanted to make sure many of the not-for-profits hopefully will be coming out and with recommendations for how that money should be spent. Also, if you can mark your calendars for Saturday, October 26th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Just want to remind everyone there's 2 events happening here at Town Hall. One is Drug Take Back Day, and the other is the Free Community Paper Shredding Day. A press release went out on that on Friday. We've got ads running in the local papers this Thursday and next Thursday, and I've sent folks the press release and all of the flyers in English and Spanish and ask you to please to send them to your committees. We want to make this a successful event. And then just so everybody knows, this is our last town board work session for October. Town Hall is closed on Tuesday, November 5th for Election Day, so there's no meeting. There's only 2 work sessions in November. We're also closed Monday, November 11th to observe Veterans Day. So our next town board work session is November 12th, and that'll be in Montauk, and we'll see if Gloria Frazee and David Buda can remember that, because they've been calling from the parking lot here at our Montauk meetings. So I just wanted to remind everybody about our schedule. So now we can move on to resolutions.
Can I say one thing, Kathy?
Sure,
Just
absolutely.
the community block grants is a really great project. I was speaking with Eric Shantz from the Housing Department about that recently, and actually Tom and I saw the benefits of that program, some new cabinets at Windmill. We met a resident who was just, very, very happy. And I think it's a very important program that sometimes gets overlooked because it's not new projects, but it's keeping things livable and nice. And so I just would encourage people to come to that public hearing. And if there's any use for those funds for organizations that might be appropriate, we welcome all ideas.
Yeah, usually we have, more asks than we have money.
Yeah.
So then it becomes, a balancing act on our part. But yeah, no, that money's been put to great use, over the years for community projects. Okay, we're up to resolutions. David, you have the first one?
I do. I'd like to, happy to offer Resolution 2024-1275. It's to accept the proposal from the Burial Ground Preservation Group for the Ben and Edwards Cemeteries. The proposal was dated November 15, 2023 for the amount of $9,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I have Resolution 2024-1276. This is a budget modification for the Architectural Review Board. This will move $200 from office equipment to office expense in the same amount.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 1277 is to authorize Clean Energy Communities grant application. This is where the town has received notification of NYSERDA's Clean Energy Communities program that the town qualifies for a $100,000 grant to use on pre-approved energy projects, whereas the town is committed to updating our municipal fleet with electric vehicles and retiring gas or diesel vehicles, installing electric vehicle charging stations throughout the township to assist in the clean energy transition of the community. Whereas the town would like to make an application to CEC to purchase an electric vehicle pickup truck to replace a gas truck, a charging station to be installed at Westlake Drive Comfort Station in Montauk, several pieces of electric landscaping equipment, and the installation of an air source heat pump for the sanitation building. Be it resolved that the Grants Division, in coordination with the town board and the applicable departments, is authorized to file an application to NYSERDA Clean Energies.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Resolution 1278 is approval of various special events for October 2024. The following special events are hereby approved with conditions agreed upon by the reviewing committee. East Hampton Historical Farm Museum Annual Ball Game at the Terry King Ball Field, Abraham's Path Recreational Facility, Sunday, October 20th from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Next is Body Tech Fitness 20th Annual Serpent's Back Mountain Bike Do-a-thon, trail run and bike race. Whew, hard to say it, I can't imagine doing it. This will take place, starts at Heather Hills State Park, Rods Valley, Navy Road, Montauk, race on the trails. Saturday, 10/19 from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. There is a rain date for the next day, the 20th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. The Kiwanis Club of East Hampton is presenting its 25th Kiwanis Family Fun Day at the American Legion, 15 Montauk Highway, Amagansett, on Saturday, October 26th, from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. And the rain date for this one is Sunday, 10/27, from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Lastly, the Montauk School PTA Halloween Parade, various roads in Montauk, starting on South Embassy Street, ending on South Edison, Thursday, October 31st, 4 to 6 p.m.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 1279 is to accept a road widening easement in URL Parcel 8 in SP-2-1. The town board approves and accepts the following easement. The grantor is Tuckaway Homes, LLC, 81 Newtown Lane, East Hampton. The parcel is located at Parcel 8, SP1-2, map 499, block 3, lots 9 through 16. The location is First Street Road, and it's Suffolk County Tax Map number 300-75-2-12.9.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 2024-1280 is a budget modification for the airport. We're moving $2,100 from aviation fuel to building and maintenance supplies.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
1281 is to regrade the environmental aid title and amend the 2024 CSA Schedule A, and this title shall be regraded from a grade 15 to a grade 16, and this will be effective October 16th at the starting step hourly rate of $24.08 for a 40-hour work schedule.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's what we've got for resolutions. Do I have a resolution to go into exec session?
Yes, I'd like to make the motion to go into executive session for personnel, leases, license agreement, and advice of counsel.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you, everybody, for joining us today.